Would have been the greatest upset of all time, I think, for
Oh,
sure.
dude, like
I
our whole like continent would have just like been partying for forever. It would have just been
Everyone would be
so
playing
crazy.
League.
Yeah,
Your
seriously.
grandma would be playing. Your 2-year-old nephew would get on the computer and start playing some League.
Absolutely.
Hello and welcome to a very special episode of The Dive, driven by Kia Season 8, Episode 34. We are fresh off, well, we got one night's sleep, Isaac and I, after the games off of the FlyQuest Gen.G games. But, Meteos, have you stayed up the entire time since then? 'Cause it's like 1 a.m. for you.
I took a nap,
Okay, nice.
sort of.
Meteos'
been up.
definition of naps, though. One time you're like, yeah, I took a nap and it was 6 hours. I'm like, that's just sleeping, bro. How long was the nap?
This nap was 3 hours or so. I don't know. Sometimes my
Okay.
sleep schedule
That's
gets
a
kind of
nap.
cursed.
That's a nap. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
It counts. It counts.
Because I
We
woke
got
up at
Chronicler. Oh, go ahead.
4. So I
Yeah.
was like, all right, I'm filming this at 1 a.m. I'm waking up at 4. I don't think I'll be awake if I don't take a nap. But we're good. We're
Yeah.
chilling.
All right, sweet. Well, we got Chronicler here. We're on a little bit of a janky setup because we don't have a good extra mic, so we're sharing my AirPods, and we're going to pass this back and forth.
Hey everyone, I'm Chronicler. I'm the designated enemy for this episode of the Gen.G FlyQuest series. And I'm very excited to be here.
Welcome. We're
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
excited to talk about the series that we just had between us.
I mean, it was insane. We should probably just start right there, right? Like, we should start with the FlyQuest Gen.G series. I don't think there was a single serious prediction that was giving FlyQuest a snowball's chance in hell in this series. Like, everyone was saying 3-0, myself included. I didn't really think they had a shot. I thought they had a shot if they had gotten a different draw, but when they got Gen.G, I was like, well, I guess that's that. Hope they can at least be competitive in a game or two. And they completely blew away my expectations. They played so incredibly well. And it wasn't just like, they got cheesy draft wins. Like, they actually played at such a high level. They were even with Gen.G through so many of the early games. They were playing the map really well. And I just think it was like one of the craziest performances we've ever seen from a Western team.
Yeah, I just want to kind of wrap this into our whole year that we've had for the LCS, because to me this is just like a giant watershed moment of so many years we have had international tournaments in the past where we don't even get to feel like we're playing the same game as LCK teams, and it's just been hammered home that they are just so much better than us that we're not even close. But if we add on what TL looks so close versus T1 so many times, FlyQuest versus Hanwha Life pushed them to maximum games in their best of 3, took a game off them, and then pushing Gen.G to maximum games, taking 2 games off of them, using their own picks and sticking to their style. It is like, it just feels like such a dream year for the LCS, even though we ended up losing the series. The fact that in so many different series and different games versus LCK teams this year, we have felt like we are competing in the actual same game and on a very close level, just is, it still fills me with some of the most hope that I've had that I haven't tasted since 2018, since the Cloud9 upset of Afrika. And that one, even the 2018, looking back on it, feels like more short-lived with hindsight. But putting these together, I feel like with the whole year, I don't know about you guys. Maybe I'm just reaching so much, and I'm still filled with so much hopium after the
with
series.
you.
No,
But
you're totally right on that. And for me, I think it's really bittersweet because I totally agree. You know, such an amazing performance for North America, like probably our best ever. Going up against a straight up tournament favorite like Gen.G, taking him to game 5, like getting convincing wins as well. Not even just like, them playing horribly or anything or cheese, like you said. But they got me. They really got me. I go into these tournaments with the lowest expectations. I'm like, you know what? We're NA. We're the underdogs. We get swept. Yup, that's just what we do. We go home and we try again next year. But like they actually made me think we could do it this year, and I was getting so hyped up watching. They were up 2-1. I was just like, dude, it's actually happening. And then it didn't. So like part of me is feeling bad for what could have been, because that would have seriously been just the absolute greatest thing ever if they beat Gen.G.
Would have been the greatest upset of all time, I think, for sure.
Oh, dude, our whole like continent would have just like been partying for forever. It would have just
Everyone
been
would
so
be playing
crazy.
League.
Yeah,
Your grandma would be playing. Your 2-year-old nephew would get on the computer and start playing some League.
Absolutely. So on one hand, the fact that we were so close to that, you could literally taste it, and then not quite getting there hurts. But, going back, looking at it from the wider view, it is still really awesome that they got that close.
Yeah, I'm very happy that the careers of several of my favorite players did not disintegrate, which definitely would have happened if they lost. For me, particularly with FlyQuest, one of the cool things that I think I don't know how much has been mentioned, but they were also fighting against not just the fact that the expectations of NA were low, but also coming into the tournament. I think a lot of people thought that TL was still the better team, and that FlyQuest was, they got the best of 5 win, but they weren't actually up to the level of TL when those teams both played to their peak, and that is sentiment I don't think will will persevere. And to tie into even losing this, I would agree is more impressive, because I think you see this with the T1 TES series, which I know we'll talk about it more later, but that does feel, as well as T1 played, TES completely collapsed, right? Like that team just went complete boom. And I think in Africa in 2018 was very much the same situation, where it kind of takes away, whereas this felt, at least to me, felt very earned. So I think it'll stand the test of time a lot better.
I think it's actually really funny you mentioned the TES and T1 right now, because when we were walking down the hallway, we ran into Nukeduck before the series today, and we were like, oh, we heard scrims are going really well for you. It was like, yeah, well, we 4-0'd TES. And after seeing, the T1 TES series and knowing the results, we're like, well, I guess that checks out. Yeah. FlyQuest definitely look better than them.
I mean,
I
gotta
like
say,
that
man,
you.
like,
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, during the series, it was like after we won the first game, I was really excited. After we won the second game, like my hopium, my belief was like going just like ascending to the heavens. Like I was like, what if we win worlds? Like I wasn't satisfied with beating Gen.G any longer. Like we were gonna be the best team in history. It's just like I was so excited, and man, I've also, as much as I was so happy and so excited, I don't think I've ever been as sad casting a series as when they lost, like in game 5. When that Baron happened, I legitimately felt like I was gonna throw up. Like I literally thought I was gonna throw up when the Baron happened and it all went wrong, and I was like, it's actually over, isn't it? Like it's done.
Yeah, sorry, you can go first, Meteos, but I want to talk about the Baron a bit, because I do actually think that was such an interesting turning point for the game, obviously.
Oh, well, the only thing I was going to mention is off of the scrim conversation, because I do think that, FlyQuest had that. I don't know if other people have tried it, but it seems somewhat novel in that they weren't scrimming the Eastern teams leading up to Worlds, partially to conceal their picks, because FlyQuest actually drafted so many champions that just hadn't really been played in competitive much at all. That in itself is super cool, but then the fact that they're doing it against the literal best teams in the world and winning with it was just so crazy. So I do wonder how much value there is in that, because you don't really know what gets shared between teams of the same region. If certain regions just have a lot of like national pride and they don't care about integrity, they're just like, yo, here's what this NA team that scrimmed us is playing. These are all their champion pools. This is what they do. Level 1 set of vision, all this stuff. Like, you can get a ton of info from scrimming teams. So it was interesting that FlyQuest went that route of not scrimming them, not showing their cards, and they did so well. I don't know how related it was, but it definitely was the case this year.
One thing I will say is I know that there was that interview, I think it was with Nuke Duck that said that, but Papa Smithy said after, and he kind of like contradicted it, and he's like, oh, we just like our scrims hadn't been scheduled yet against them. So they didn't play them like right at the beginning, but also the LPL and LCK teams came really late. They only arrived like on, I think it was the last day that they were allowed to come, so they came as late as possible. So there definitely wasn't a ton of scrims, but I do know they did start at least scrimming with them a little bit later.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on well. I actually think that even though the Baron call didn't end up working out, I think they were losing that game. And if they don't make that call, they don't actually put, like, I think that was 100%. I know it didn't end up working out, but I think that was their shot back in the game. And I think it was a really good call, even though it ended up backfiring. Because, like, particularly given how Gen.G looked in that final game, I've seen them in that position a million times, right? And I think it looked, to me at least, knowing this team, it felt very different from some of the earlier games where they looked a lot more scattered.
Yeah, I mean, that Baron start definitely seemed super desperate to me. You know, when you're playing Fiddlesticks, he is a really specific type of champion as far as how he wants to fight. And generally, tanking Baron and getting engaged on is not ideal for him. He's more of, you know, like my teammates are drawing a ton of pressure. They forget about me, and then I counter engage with some fat crow storm kind of champ. So I think the fact that they were looking for that seemed a little desperate to me, especially like they didn't have some insanely high DPS champions for it. You know, it wasn't like some Kaisa Azir instant melt the Baron comp. It was, I think it was a little bit sketchy to begin with, but at the same time, I feel like this past week we saw so many Barons that had no right to be taken just work out. You know, in a bunch of those series, it would just be like the losing team just starts Baron in the other team's face, and they get it and win the fight afterwards. So that was surprising to me. So maybe it could have worked out.
I mean, I'm with Chronicler as well. That like I thought they were just getting outscaled, right? Like
they were not winning that game. Yeah, I want because they had a Callista, and I think Massu was the standout player of arguably, or not arguably, I think of the entire series, right? Like across all games. He was playing Callista into Rumble, Ziggs, and a Fat Smolder. Like, I know that they had a part of the dive of the Yone and the Fiddle, but I think it's really, specifically against Canyon, who also loves to play similar style of champions, I actually 100% think that at that point, if they don't go for Baron, even if they get the Baron, I think the game might have actually kind of went off base like 10, 15 minutes earlier. No, I actually agree with you, Meteos, that it's important not to get too hooked on that specific moment, because to me, I think that once they weren't able to find any early game leads, like the wave clear of Ziggs and Smolder, even into Baron, is absolutely disgusting. Like, I don't know if that alone would have been enough to bring them back into the game.
Yeah, I mean, it would have had to be like you get Baron, you then are able to set up around dragons, you get a big flank, because it's like Minos was talking about. I mean, Fiddlesticks getting engaged on is literally worst case scenario, right? Because you can't even use your ultimate, and like that's like the whole point of the champion basically is being able to come over a wall and like engage on them as they're coming in. If you can't control vision, if you're not pushing the pace of the game, if you're not the ones that are actually starting objective first and stuff and making them walk in, then it's pretty doomed. But yeah, I mean, I'm not like mad about the Baron or anything. I think it was absolutely reasonable for them to start it and take a bit of a desperate call in that situation. So I wasn't frustrated about that by any means. And you know, I think they played incredibly well, like far beyond expectation. And I mean, obviously, like Quad was great. You know, their top side was great, but I was by far the most impressed with their bot lane and with Massu in particular, just because these are NA rookies, and I feel like, not even just with NA rookies, but with like any Western rookies, it's always like, yeah, they need a lot of time. Like that's always the story when they go international, is like, yeah, they got absolutely pounded, but like maybe next year they'll do well, you know? And they were just going toe to toe. I think Busio had his best series for sure against Gen.G. I thought he really played a lot better than he did in some of the previous matches, and I think that he was still playing pretty solid in those. But Massu, I feel like Massu was just one of the best AD carries in the tournament. Like he was playing as well as some of these really, really good LPL and LCK AD carries, which I feel like is almost never the case for Western AD carries, period. And this was a rookie doing it, which is just mind blowing to me. I mean, I've said this a bunch of times, but I just think it's so cool that 2022, this guy's an amateur. 2023, he won Most Valuable Prospect in NACL. This year, he wins Rookie of the Year. He makes MSI. He wins LCS. He goes to Worlds, and he's one game away from beating Gen.G. Like, it's insane. And like, I think he was the star of the team in a lot of these games, and like his reaction times, his team fighting were all so impressive. There was in that Kaisa game. I was so impressed when Keen got on that flank and was completely out of vision, and Gen.G like perfectly pushed him into Keen with no cleanse, no flash. I was like, oh, we actually just lost the game. He's about to come around the corner, instantly stun him, and he's going to die without using a cooldown, and that's just going to be that. And he like instantaneously Zonia's when the guy came out of fog, like no panic, no hesitation at all. His team gets plasma on him. He repositions with all, doesn't die. They win the fight, and like these are the moments that I just expect Western teams to lose. I just expect us to get outhands. I expect us to get outplayed. And he was able to step up in those moments in a way that, like, I don't know that I've ever seen. It was just crazy to me. And I feel like this is maybe pushing us into a bit of a different conversation, but it's like, I think he was probably the best rookie globally this year. And then that begs the question of, like, where does he rank all time as far as like best rookies? Is this the best Western rookie year ever? Is this like, I mean, Faker had the best rookie year ever, period, and no one's going to debate that. But it's like, where does he rank? Because it's really, really crazy. You think about some of the best Western players ever. It's like Caps didn't go to Worlds his first year. Perks was like the G2 vacation year in 2016, his rookie year. Like we've had obviously lots of incredible rookies in NA. I would say it's like Licorice and like JoJo and Danny, guys like that. But it's like this is one of the best rookie years we've ever seen for sure in the West, if not maybe even the best. Like I can't definitively say that because it's so hard to remember all the different rookie years. But like his performance was just insane.
Yeah, that's a pretty good list. I would also add Hansama to it. If we start going back and combing through some of these ones that actually went really far, like the Licorice plus the Zazel contracts.
Oh, I was just saying the NA
Hansama.
ones. I wasn't trying to list all the E ones, so don't get mad at me. I'm sure there's lots.
But it again, this story, we started it at MSI when we were so impressed with how Massu handled the pressure on an international stage. And this is just confirming that was not like a blip on the radar or a fluke. And that's kind of why I wanted to look at this year as a whole after this series, because I just feel like it is so big for the region as a whole. On the analyst that Shox was asking, oh, was game one a fluke, or was were any of these moments like flukes? And I feel like pretty emphatically we can now like look back at our whole year and say that no, like we are truly on the climb. I just feel like
Would you say the gap is closing?
It's so funny how long that meme has actually existed. And this is the first time where I would be like, hell yeah, it is closing. I would say that shit is closing. Fuck that gap.
I mean, it was one team, one tournament that did pretty well. I don't know if we're gonna get super carried away, but it's a good start. It's a good start. If we keep seeing that.
Wait,
Yeah, I'll
TL
say the
almost
gap's
beat
closing.
T1 multiple times. And TL was like the best lane swap team in the world.
And FlyQuest also beat HLE. That's multiple teams.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's a step in the right direction, but there's a lot of years to make up for. So I think it's going to take a little bit more data
Wait,
points.
we're going to have to deport Meteos. Get him out of here. There's not enough hopium in this.
We also didn't say the gap has closed. It's closing. I think
I've seen the gap closing for a while.
Trust
that's
the
all I'm
process,
saying.
Meteos. The gap is closing, okay? It's getting smaller.
True. Okay.
You guys want me to talk a little bit about it from the side of a Gen.G fence perspective? I don't because
From the side that's shaking in its boots.
yeah, I can. Emily Dracos and Atlas and I watched together, and I can assure you, I was in fact shaking. So something that I thought was really interesting, which is the same way that you felt after game number 2, right? Is that I actually went back. No 3-0 Swiss team has ever won their first game. Like over the course, and that's including JDG and Gen.G, right? Because I feel like LNG and Gen.G last year face off against BLG, I think is not too shocking. But I saw that game number 1. I was like, okay, it happens. And then game number 2 happened. But particularly in game number 3, there was the way that Gen.G, I think they got the catch on. They almost killed Inspired. I forgot who they killed. I think it was Bwipo. I'm not sure. It was one of the members. And then they mega overchased. And I've been watching this team for the entire year. When they overchased into the jungle, got the triple from Massu, and then from that point on, the game was over, right? Because they could have peeled back, set up for Dragon Vision. That's when I'm like, no, they are like this team is actually on the verge of collapse, right? Like that, because that normally is something that I don't think I've seen. Because Gen.G out of all the teams, like T1, I'm like, yeah, of course, that's just a normal Tuesday for them. They love chasing, they love going really deep on these fights. But that was the point where I turned to my colleague on the side. I was like, "Oh God, Max, this is not good." And then Nidalee, Kenya Nidalee came in game 4, gap closing, yeah. And then Kenya Nidalee came in game 4, and then I felt a lot more confident. But particularly with how they looked afterwards, I know Ashley also did an interview with Helper, the coach of the guy with the funny reactions from Gen.G. That I don't think is released yet. But for Gen.G specifically, much more than for T1, like this tournament really does feel like a final point, right? Particularly for Chovy, where I think he had a pretty dreadful series. Outside of the Smolder game, I don't think he looked like what this player has looked like domestically, and really even at this tournament, although I'd say he hasn't had the best tournament so far. And I think you can just see in his eyes when that game 3 happened, like I was having a tough time. I can only imagine for those players it was a lot worse. But I also am really happy, even though even as close as it was, that after that first game, it still felt like it could just be just that one game. But even with creative drafts, like there are teams in the LCK that pull out, like there's been a lot of Seraphine teams, like CV Max loves Seraphine. There's been a lot of Peanut played Fiddlesticks this year. I don't remember if it was against Gen.G, but like there are teams in the LCK that try to do this as well. And it is really impressive, even though I think Gen.G didn't play their best game. Like even then, even on an off day, pushing Gen.G as far as this series went, I think is still kind of mind-boggling. And I kind of wonder what it means for Gen.G's continued run as well. Whether this is a good or bad thing for them, right? Because
I think it's good for sure.
I think it's good. The more I see, the more I'm like, playing a lot of games is actually so OP. Every single 3-0 team we've seen in their first series just looks like, even JDG last year in their first game against KT, I think was not the team that played later.
Yeah, I think this for sure, will make Gen.G stronger. You're welcome for the training that we just
Thank you, FlyQuest.
But also, in the interview afterwards, Canyon's talking about, we have a lot of stuff and we're gonna mega cook after this too, and that just makes me excited for the progression of the tournament as we move forward here and we discuss the rest of the coming matchups as well. I feel like this series is gonna have ramifications for the tournament overall as well, and so I think it is good for Gen.G to get all these games. And now be feel more comfortable in reacting, because I feel like they had really good reactions, after these losses, to actually pull it back. And Inspired mentioned as well, how they pretty quickly recognized how FlyQuest were really trying to, scale and look for these 5-on-5 team fights and front to back and stuff. And so then in game 5, when they slam this Smolder and Gen.G are just locking the game down, and everyone's farming for 20 minutes. We've had so much hype And then game 5 is like, we're all farming for 20 minutes and Chovy's got 225 stacks on Smolder and nothing crazy has happened yet. And then like you feel so much pressure, and then it's like all released at that Baron basically. I was like, oh man. Game 5 felt so hard to win. I felt like for so long before anything had even happened. I was like, oh man, I could like feel it like slipping away.
I was kind of feeling some despair after Gen.G left up Yone. And then I feel like FlyQuest didn't want Yone. Like, they really did not want Yone. I'm sure when they saw it wasn't banned, they were just like, oh, God, like, we can't give them Yone. I guess we'll take it. Because it seemed like Quad was a bit shaky on it. You know, he got like 4 CS in the first 2 waves. He was like just really having a rough time in that Smolder matchup, which, you know, I feel for him, man. It's hard when there's a champion like Yone who comes into the meta, maybe you haven't played it a whole lot, and then it's just permabanned every game, but when it does go through, you're expected to hard carry on it. So, didn't manage to happen, but yeah, it did feel a little bleak from just like that early game.
I fully agree. I mean, it's also tough. It's like, if you look at Quad in his career, he's a control mage guy, right? Like, that's what he is. And, you know, when he joined FlyQuest, everyone's like, okay, FlyQuest got rid of Jensen and picked up Jensen Jr., right? Like, you know, you look at all his most played champions, it's all control mages. This year, obviously, AD carries have kind of risen because, you know, you had to play AD carries all year. But he had, I think, 4 games of Yone all time in his career before that game, and you're having to then play it in a game 5 against Gen.G. Like, that's not to say that he didn't practice it. I'm sure that he did, and Quad has shown that he can play a lot of different stuff. I think he has actually improved a lot this year. But I felt similar to you, Meteos, where I felt like, okay, they kind of like got us on this one where, you know, you can't let it through and give Chovy red side Yone, but also I don't think we're going to win with Yone. And Inspired also said that they just didn't even think about Smolder. So he said that wasn't something that they had really considered in draft. And so like when that got locked in, it was just like, they're like, oh crap, like, oops, you know? So it was just one of those things that it wasn't something that they were considering because Smolder had really fallen out of prio, and when it had coming out at Worlds, hadn't looked good.
Yeah, it also, I think, unfortunately for Gen.G at this point, they might just have to lean into the villain role, because already I think this Gen.G team is often unfairly called a boring team when they have actually had, like, the Kassadin in game number 2, right? They're the only team that is still consistently playing Nidalee. I think the fact that they were able to set up that Yone trap, that I do 100% agree with you. Like, that was there was no winning there, because either you pick away the Yone or Chovy gets one of his most iconic champions and the strongest champion on the patch. But the fact that they are now responsible for also ending this amazing FlyQuest run with Smolder as well, even though for me it's a little bit bittersweet, because while I think Quad really struggled, like, I also think Chovy's laning phases this tournament have been pretty lackluster. That specific Smolder game, like, I've seen that a million times, and sometimes it was with Smolder, sometimes it was with Draven, sometimes it was with Zeri, but like, if he gets actual control of an early laning phase, the way that they did in that game, I think you can feel already Gen.G's playing their game, and then from that point on, it gets really, really hard. But at the same time, I think it's also really impressive that he was able to do so on a champion that had a 30% win rate. But because Smolder is probably one of the most hated champions on the patch, it's going to be like, well, pick Smolder and won. Which I think is, as a Gen.G fan, obviously, is always going to be a little rough. Good company there, as a Gen.G fan.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last thing I would say about all this is, you know, like, with no hint of irony, I think we can say NA greater than EU. Like, it does feel good to say that LCS has now, like, outperformed a couple years in a row. And I think that, I know you're laughing, Meteos, but it's like, it does feel good.
That being a takeaway is so funny.
But is it? Am I wrong? Am I wrong? I mean, it's like 2 years in a row we make it to quarters. LEC doesn't. I think that, for so many years we were the punching bag, and so it does feel good to have our teams performing well. I don't think that's like the biggest takeaway or anything like that, and that's why we've talked about all this other stuff for the last 20 minutes or whatever. But I do still think it is exciting to show that like our region feels like it is improving, and our region is showing that they can compete. We had Energy last year with this like incredibly exciting series taking down G2. That was such an exciting moment for NA fans. And I know Meteos, you say you come in and you never have any hope. To me, that was like something that gave me hope last year and was such an exciting moment last year at Worlds. And so that's one of those things where I'm like, okay, yeah, well, we had one of those like big moments where I was super hyped back in 2018 at Worlds, but it had been a long time. And so coming into this year, when TL started to perform poorly, I was like, okay, well, we probably don't get that exciting thing again anymore. But FlyQuest kind of gave that to us again with with HLE and then the Gen.G series. So like, I think it's cool to see our teams performing really well, and to me, seeing our league kind of like rise in the rankings a little bit.
Yeah, I still am salty that we didn't get any North America versus Europe matches. That's the only thing we were
True.
robbed of.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't really thinking about EU, but I don't punch down. EU's they're doing their thing.
That's so much worse.
I don't punch down. I'm happy with how NA's doing.
Yeah, I mean, we're up there with Gen.G, so we don't really talk about the minor. No, I'm just kidding.
All right, let's move on to the semifinals here, and talk about some of the hype matchups coming forward. So they don't actually have on the schedule now which one is going to be broadcast first quite yet because we're still so fresh. But we can just start with the LPL one. How about that? Because BLG versus Weibo is well, I mean, both of these have a lot of history. But the BLG versus Weibo, both last year Worlds, and then if we contrast that with what happened in summer playoffs and finals and stuff, it's like Weibo has the chance to do the funniest thing. Again?
Do they? Should they? No, I think they do. That's the real. I think that's the
last year.
It's the fear of a lot of LPL fans I've talked to as well, where they're like, we don't want that to happen again. And I think it's really warranted because even though I do think that this BLG had the series yesterday was the best series of the tournament, the best individual game was that final Hanwha Life versus BLG game, right? Like that game was, I don't know, that was on another plane entirely. Yeah. Elk. Yeah, and the double gap. I don't know. There were so many cinematic moments in that one. But we have seen, and we said this coming into the Weibo LNG series as well, if both teams play as they did in their quarter, BLG should 100% stomp that matchup. But that is not what's going to happen, most likely. And if there is so much pressure on BLG, and I think effectively zero on Weibo in terms of expectations coming in here, and all that context, I think is going to make this a very hard series to read. Even though on paper, I think it is pretty self-explanatory, especially given the fact that like they faced off in LPL finals and it was a very swift and merciless slaughter, right?
I think what I'm really excited about for these semifinals is no team in the semis right now has looked untouchable, right? Because we were talking about how Gen.G is going to level up from their series with FlyQuest. When you come in 3-0ing, it kind of, it almost makes you weaker. You think too highly of yourself. Your weaknesses don't get exposed. And legit every team in the semis has had their struggles getting here. Obviously, Gen.Gs are more recent. They almost lost to FlyQuest, which might be the biggest struggle of all of them. But I think that, I didn't expect Weibo to beat LNG at all. Like, I thought that was going to be a quick 3-0 because Weibo was looking real rough. They were saying in their interviews, like, yeah, we've got some issues. Just going to have to try to 1v9. But they ended up winning, looking pretty good while doing it. And then, also BLG, they almost didn't even make it into knockouts despite being a pretty, heavy tournament favorite. A lot of people expecting them to just win the entire thing. So I'm really excited. I don't know how any of these games are going to go because nobody has looked super clean. But at the same time, I think they all will be leveling up a lot because they've had these, getting to play a lot of games, going through losses, figuring out what works for them, understanding the meta a bit better. So I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were gonna jump in. I think BLG should be pretty favored. I do think that despite the fact that they had struggles in Swiss, to me, I talked about this on the desk on the day of that series, where it was like, maybe it's Cope, maybe it's not, but I wasn't really that worried about two best of one losses from BLG. I do think they didn't look as clean, even against G2 and so on. But this is a team that, despite the fact that they went 7-1 in series in the LPL regular season, like I watched this team a lot in LPL summer. They lost game ones and best of threes to so many teams, right? It happened time and time again. They even lost a game one in a series to NIP, right? Like to the worst team in their league. And despite the fact they're 7-1 series, they're like 15-7, right? They had a worse game score than top. They had like a very similar game score to LNG and Weibo. But once they actually got in the playoffs and it was best of five time, they went 9-1 and just kind of slammed everyone and won the title. So to me, it was like, maybe it was Cope, maybe it wasn't, but I still had a lot of faith in this team going into best of five. And I felt like that series against Hanwha was the first time I got to see the BLG I expected arrive at Worlds, and that gave me a lot of faith that they are going to be able to play at that level going forward. There's always a chance, of course, that Weibo can kind of make some magic happen and upset. But like when I look at these two teams in paper, when I look at how these two teams played against each other in the LPL, I just feel like BLG should be very heavily favored. I thought Knight played really well in their previous series. I don't think Zeka played poorly, but I felt like he was kind of a non-factor, like he was just kind of there. And to me, when you look at like how Elk was playing, it was unreal. Like those were some of the most impressive fights I felt like I had seen from an AD carry ever. Watching Elk play was just like, it was nuts. Like I was literally jumping up and down and screaming watching this guy play. Like it's just magic watching him when he's at his best.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned how they play each other in the LPL. I mean, it was also the double 3-0s in playoffs and finals, and so once again, it is setting the stage. I mean, we set the stage last year. They were also favored, and that's why it's like, if you're arguing the other side right now, I think most of it is on like the surprise upset potential. So I think this probably even more this year than last year because of summer playoffs. But can you actually see it happening this time around? Do you guys feel like this one would be more of an upset than last time? Because I feel like this time.
No, I don't know, because I think this Weibo is a lot better than last year's Weibo. Like I think, as you're saying, like the domestic performance does feel like it should be really heavily lopsided. But like last year, the only reason why they won was because the Shy got for one series a time machine back to 2018 and just absolutely obliterated, and then went back to, fortunately for me, old the Shy in the next series. But I really do, especially after seeing this Gen.G series, all Weibo would need is like a good opening in a first game, right? Like a draft read that doesn't end up working out, a gamble that's taken, and you can spin off into a completely different series. If like BLG take a super convincing game number one, I think BLG 100% is better. I think you should predict BLG because the level of play in the Hanwha series, the domestic performance against this team all warrants this. But on the day, I do think that Weibo is just, they are a top tier team, right? Like they handily dispatched of LNG. And just because of that, I think that this should be skewed. But I would not be surprised if Weibo just end up somehow pulling the heist again.
I mean, honestly, though, like, I don't know how you guys felt, but watching Weibo LNG, all I could think watching this series was, God damn, I wish FlyQuest drew one of these teams because I did not think that series looked like a good series as far as like super clean level of play. I do think I agree with you though, Chronicler. I think this Weibo is like a more legitimate team than the one last year, and it was just kind of like this like freak thing that you couldn't really predict, where it's like, okay, the Shy went Super Saiyan and now you're in finals randomly. But to me, like the LNG Weibo series was such a lower level than the HLE BLG series the next day that it was like I felt like I was watching two different games. So I really struggle to see, Weibo doing it. I do think, of course, it's always possible that you can just show a way better performance than you did in the previous thing. But it's like based on the quarterfinals, based on everything I saw in the LPL, I couldn't ever legitimately predict it. The one thing I will say though, I thought Xiaohu was smurfing on Aurora. I thought he actually had the best Aurora games of the tournament. I thought he played really, really well on it. And I've largely been like pretty unimpressed with like mid lane Aurora and have felt like, oh, yeah, this pick is really highly rated, but often when it goes through, I don't know if it's just because it's getting let through against mid laners that people think can't play well or something. But I thought Xiaohu really showed up on it and actually even in fights where their AD carry was dying super early, I usually feel like, oh, Aurora can't actually get the job done if you lose your AD early because you're so much burst damage and not enough consistent. Xiaohu kind of made me rethink that. And that was one of the first series where I was watching it and I was like, oh, maybe this champion actually is as OP as everyone's saying because he was getting so much work done. I felt like even there was one game I think where he was playing Aurora. Let me double check where they were playing Ashe Aurora. I want to say, which game was it? Was it game? Okay, yeah, it was game 2, I think. Or maybe they even did that multiple times. Oh, yeah, they did it. Game 2 was a different game. No, just game 2. But I remember where Light was dying in some of these fights like instantaneously, and Xiaohu would just carry the fight anyway, solo. It felt like, and so I was really impressed.
Yeah, specifically that one comp from Weibo, even though they fucking lost that game, which I'm still mad about because they shouldn't have. Like that comp was disgusting because it was. So they set it up with the Aurora, and then you had Amumu ult on top, you had Renata ult on top, and then the amount of damage coming out from the Ashe as well, even if she did get blown up early, was insane. That was the worst trade offer ever. Remember, that was when they pushed in for bot lane inhibitor and then got completely wiped and then just lost the game off of that. Otherwise, there would have been a Weibo 3-0.
Dude. Chris was also trolling Light in that game. There was that was the Renata game where I don't even know what he was doing. Like his AD carry,
he was flanking.
His AD carry is under the tier 2 tower mid, and he wraps around Raptors on Renata to do a flanking Renata ult, and then the Renata ult is going towards them, and they just walk forward and kill his Ashe. And I'm like, what are you doing? And then in the next fight, he did like it was over by their blue buff. And Light is like going like down towards into the blue buff, and he like walks around the other way again and to try to like throw some wonky ult. And I'm like, and he uses bailout on himself. He's like 2 screens away from the Ashe. I was like, you are griefing Light right now.
There were a couple moments where Chris was griefing not just that game also, but Xiaohu I would even extend it to beyond the Aurora. His Orianna game was also really, really good. So I feel like Xiaohu just over the series was really good, and I think that is something that like can give them hope. I am a bit worried for the Breathe Bin matchup with the way that they have been playing going into this. So yeah, I mean, I'm still definitely favoring BLG, but I'm ready to be surprised and delighted.
Yeah, because I do think if you really, again, I would always predict BLG just off of the level that we've seen so far. But also I think Light, outside of Xiao, has been, and actually arguably, I think out of the entire team, he's been the most consistent member. And I don't think Bin has been as dominant this tournament as he has. I'd still say he's obviously one of the best top laners, but I don't think he's been quite as dominant as he was in a lot of other tournaments. And I know that's coming off of his series against Doran, but I do feel like, you kind of need 2 people to play the game to really really impress. Maybe Light can make a miracle happen, because even as good as Elk is, I think Light has been able to at least perform close. Not quite the Hanwha Game 4 level, but but it's probably going to be BLG win, which I think for this team is amazing because last year them not making it was really rough, and basically their entire year has been tooled towards just besting the foe that bested them last year, right? And actually making it to finals.
Do you think BLG has a better shot against, whatever LCK team they would meet in the finals in Weibo?
Yes. Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah, you can go first.
Oh, I mean, I was just gonna say, I think for sure, right? And I mean, the other thing that's kind of exciting that we haven't touched on is that we're guaranteed an LPL LCK finals. I find those way more interesting generally than like all LPL or all LCK. Obviously, there are some exceptions. I mean, like the T1 DRX one and stuff like that, because there's so much history and story with it. But largely, I think those are the most exciting, and people like seeing, the clash of styles, the clash of things, and people I feel like have been wanting Knight versus Chovy for so long, and so if we got Knight versus Chovy in a World Finals, I think that is just like so crazy and would be such an exciting finals. And I mean, if T1 upset, then that's crazy too. But like, yeah, I mean, I think BLG is favored, and I think BLG makes for the most exciting story in finals as well.
Yeah, particularly individually, right? Like the foil of Knight versus Chovy, both players that domestically have just ran their regions, that are friends, that I don't know, it's basically a dream in that regard. And I think that's also, again, even a lot of the LPL fans I talk to are just like, we want it to be BLG, right? Because we're worried about Weibo if they somehow make it again after last year's debacle. Because that was Isaac and I were there. Obviously, it was not a great final. It's very forgettable from a gameplay perspective.
All right, should we talk about the other side then, the T1 Gen.G again? Because you've got a lot of. Go ahead.
Yeah, let's take a quick break though, and then after this break, we'll be right back with more dive.
Hello?
Bro, why are you parking?
Seriously? What is that?
Remote smart parking assist. You could have parked anywhere.
They could have parked there. They could have parked there. They could have parked there.
Welcome back to the dive, driven by Kia, and it's now time to talk about the next semifinal.
And it's a banger. It is a banger that we're well familiar with. T1 versus Gen.G. How many times, Chronicler? You could go through all of them.
It was 5 finals in a row. But I really, and this is entirely our fault because we've memed it so much. But the fact that this is a semifinal is really cool. I just hope we can undo a lot of LCK propaganda about how tired we're all of it. Because even domestically, I'm like, I feel like it's simultaneously understandable that we're like, well, here we go again. And just for the record, it has been very one-sided. T1 has won one of those, which was the first one in spring 2022, which is a good while ago. And then the last time they did beat Gen.G in any best of 5 was last year at MSI. So that was a year and a half ago. And then outside of that, it's just been very one-sided. But the narratives for this series basically write themselves. We did the thing with the spring one where we just reused all the openings of T1 versus Gen.G. I'm actually going to see if we can do this for the semi as well, because it's just really funny because you see all the different arenas. You have a Bald Atlas because he lost the hair bet. We have Lauren there for one of them as well because she was the host back at the time. So it's a storied history. There is a million layers to it, especially at this point. And the last one in spring was one of the best LCK finals that we had in years. And then obviously we had the Hanwha Life upset, which was also incredible. But like we had a lot of bad finals. And that one was absolutely insane. Like had like last minute counter picks. We had Canyon pulling out I think it was a Kha'Zix. There was so much that went into that series, and it was expected to be another kind of Gen.G sweep, right? So it was really good, and I can only hope we get something similar here.
I'm super excited for this round of it, simply because of the glow up that T1 have had at Worlds, and it is actually like out of a cartoon. The like, LCK Summer, watching LCK
Armor
Summer, and
goes
then
crazy.
coming to Worlds, and you just see T1 like Hulk out and go Super Saiyan, and there's just flashing lights everywhere. It's like, it's Worlds time.
They were
Owners
so
popping
bad.
off.
So like, it wasn't just the meta. It was Faker was missing shuffles on Barrow and Azir. Like there are so many of these plays where he would just go in and die, and then like Carrier would be like, "I'm going as well." And he's, "What are you guys doing? What?" And then and then Carrier in the TS series dies once on Pyke when he was just actually kind of running it, and didn't die in the rest of that series playing engage supports. It's just, God, it's so impressive. And the fact that it keeps happening shouldn't take away from that, but it kind of does. Because at this point, we keep getting clowned as LCK casters for being like, no, guys, this summer, they really sucked.
Yeah, I really love the narrative of T1 being the underdogs while being like
Defending
the
world
most-
champions.
yeah, defending world champions, most successful team all time. Yeah, but they've definitely had that protagonist glow up going on, and I don't know, man. Despite what all their record says, I would be sweating if I was Gen.G going up against T1 at Worlds. I feel like the fact that they've beat them so many times is probably going to work against them more than anything else, just because it's just such an inevitability. It's like, what can you do? It just seems like something that's going to happen to me. I don't know. I can't quite put my finger on it. I couldn't quantify it, but I would be really surprised if Gen.G could win. I think the Cosmos just won't allow it.
It's legit. They'll like, forget the stats. I'll take the magic. Like
100%.
It's legit that. It's like, you can take your Chovy CS numbers. You can take your Canyon counter picks. Forget that. I'll take T1 at Worlds every time, It's just like, it is stupid, but it just happens every time. So at a certain point, you're just like,
It's not stupid.
well, I guess that's that. It's just like, I guess T1 just goes to Worlds and wins. And Chronicler over here is the boy who called Faker sucks. He cried Faker sucks, and now no one believes him. He's in the hills. He's like, please, Faker sucks. Believe me this time.
He's been
We're
a
like,
fraud for 10 years.
I
only
don't know.
4
I mean, it
worlds.
looks pretty good last year. It looks pretty good this year.
No. But like, you need to understand, because Spring Faker was second best. Like, Chovy was very clearly the best. Chovy was doing ungodly things that split, but Faker was the second. But ever since MSI, he was just not good. Like, it was very telling that he wasn't even in contention for first, second, or third team All Pro, and no, we got no tweets. We got no community outcry. No, even T1 fans were like, yeah, you know what? This split, And then even in playoffs, even in regional qualifiers, and then you see that TES series, and you're like, well, I guess summer actually doesn't matter. It's like clockwork.
We've heard spring split doesn't matter from double lift, but none of the splits matter for Faker.
It's awesome though, because they don't want it to get boring, right? If they just stomp everyone all the time, that's so boring. Let them barely make worlds. Let them lose. How was like 3 series in a row, game 5s, just
Final
perma-feeding.
game, just qualify.
Yeah, but because now they get that glow up, it's like it's way more interesting. Serious fan service from T1. Gotta applaud them for that.
It's smart. How do world champions become the underdog and like get the underdog buff? Plus, you get the underdog buff. Plus, you're the defending world champs buff. It's actually OP. I want to focus on Carrier though, because for me in the TS series, I was just completely blown away. People were like coming into this, it was like, oh man, it's so heavily melee engaged support meta that Carrier's not going to be able to be a difference maker. And then especially the Rakan play where he gets deep into blue side jungle really early, and then even though TS come and push him out with 5 members, he dodges everything, charms every single person to allow T1 to turn off the Baron and wipe them. And I was just like, my God, he gets hit by nothing and charms every single person, absolutely styled on them. And then like his Bard roaming around, and then he gets to pick like Pyke. Maybe for fun, maybe for
I think
serious.
that was a world skin.
And
That was
he's
a
just
skin
world
pick
skin,
for
world
sure.
and he's just
That was the
cruising
goofiest
around.
game. That was seriously the goofiest game at Worlds. If you watch that game, it was like Carrier was just laning with Faker the entire game. They were just Pyke Galio lane. It's not even like he was roaming around with his jungler. He was just straight up like, yeah, what's up, Faker? Like, you want to lane? Like, hey, I'll pull him into your taunt, or you'll taunt him and I'll pull him and it'll be awesome. And they were just doing that and it worked somehow. Like, it made no sense.
Faker locked in at Galio is like, last time I played Galio at Worlds, I was alone. Get over here, Carrier. Back me up. No, the really interesting thing for me, the one thing that I think actually, outside of everything we've talked about so far, actually is going to hamstring T1. And the more Worlds runs I've seen, and like EDG's run was a reminder of this, DRX's run was a reminder of this as well, is that getting a 3-0 quarters, I think can actually really, like getting a real, because TES just completely collapsed, right? Like as good as T1 is, I think even in Swiss, we saw that they are clearly a very different team. Like TES did not play the video game outside of like the last 20 minutes of game 3. And that can, I think, throw you off. Additionally, the one team that has been able to very consistently deal with T1, their shenanigans, and the way that they play the map has been Gen.G, right? And like particularly in the mid lane matchup, that matchup has only gone one way outside of, again, last year's MSI, which even then was a really close series, and I think was Chovy's worst tournament that he's had in recent years. And that outside of that, it's just been, ever since summer 2022, it's just been Gen.G winning those series very decisively. And the fact that they got tested and pushed and clearly now are going to have to completely reiterate on how they play the game.
But have you considered Faker at Worlds? He just goes into low power mode during the regular season so he could charge up his batteries for Worlds.
So I'd love to hear your guys' opinion on this. In my opinion, in game or in the first semifinals, BLG should win, right? Like if both teams play as they have, if both teams play to like somewhere between their floor and their peak, like 100% BLG should be the winner. I think in this series, it's way harder to call. Like actually, even I've watched this team so many times. There is so much conflicting info here for me. And I genuinely don't know what kind of matchup we're going to get.
I mean, I feel like if I predict with my head, I'm predicting Gen.G 100% of the time, you know? But then it's just like Meteos is saying, and like I'm kind of joking about, it's just like how many times do you have to watch T1 just do well at Worlds to just be like, that's kind of just how it goes, you know? It's just how it is. And I do think, as much as I'm being sarcastic about it and joking about it, there is something to that because it can become a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy because players buy into it and players get nervous about it. And when you play against T1 and T1 just kind of wins every single time, it's like, even if you've beaten them a bunch of times, it's like, oh, but it's T1 at Worlds, it's T1 at semifinals. And I think in that way, and in a lot of ways, there's way more pressure on Gen.G for this to actually like be successful for the legacy of these players. And I mean, for a player like Chovy especially, right? He did get his MSI win, and I think that helped to alleviate some of the criticism he gets as like, oh, the whole choker narrative and all this sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's the same thing with Knight. People will always, look at you, and if you want to be called best player in the world, if you want to be called, best in your role, people will say, yeah, how many times do you won Worlds though, right? And so I do think that adds so much pressure, fair or not, and I think it's not fair. But that exists, right? It exists. And so I think there's a tremendous amount of pressure on Gen.G and on Chovy. And as much as there is like this kind of like joking nature about T1 at Worlds, there is that like almost like mythos about them where you just kind of realize that they are going to play at an incredibly high level. And even if you've beaten them a bunch of times before, you have to beat them at Worlds, which is just different. Like I can never remember T1 just like rolling over and dying at Worlds. It just doesn't feel like it happens.
Well, it's also the specific roster, right? Because even in 2021, when they still had Kana, who is a much more one-dimensional player than Zeus was, like the four-core-man unit brought DK to 5 games when they were not expected to really do so. And then this roster, even excluding Zeus, has made semifinals, finals, won one of those finals, and has had at lowest a top 4 finish, because I think they finished 4th at this year's MSI, but outside of that, they've always been I think it's warranted, right? But I do think that specifically for Gen.G, the fact that they have faced off so many times against T1 should take away some of the, which I think very justified. Like, intangibles are a thing. Like, players are just human, right? So they're gonna get grabbed by these things whether they like it or not. I think, especially in these high stake situations.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big thing in this one too is if the question that you asked earlier, is this FlyQuest experience that Gen.G had actually going to be a beneficial thing for them going into their matchup with T1 now, or is it actually going to detract? Like, are they going to change too many things in response to it, or are they going to be able to rely on how well they know T1? Because I feel like with everyone on T1 seemingly playing so well, I feel like they're also a team that has the possibilities of cooking and bringing spicy stuff into a semifinals matchup. And like when you have these many weapons on a team, I feel like that's what makes it so exciting, and they always have a chance. Even though, yeah, I would probably favor Gen.G as being the favorites as well.
I also think Owner has just been stellar at Worlds, like absolutely stellar.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he whipped out the Poppy jungle, which I haven't really seen a whole lot of lately. Been a lot more Poppy support. Yeah, I mean, I can't really think of many bad games Owner's had.
He had the like three or four Vi games almost in a row, where he was just absolutely carrying engage after engage for them as well. And that's why I'm saying, like, seems like seemingly every part of this team is playing super well now, and so that's why it's so exciting to see the world champs back in form here to really push them to the edge.
It's really nice for Owner in particular, because he was in summer, in my opinion, their best performing player, right? Like, Zeus was all over the place. Carrier was actively detrimental. Faker was just kind of there. And then Guma was good, but, you can't. I don't know if I assume you guys know the egg in the ramen analogy that Guma always brings out. He's just an egg. Like, what can he do by himself? But Owner's playoff was kind of. Oh, so specifically, Owner was like, so if you have, I don't remember all the other specific rules, but basically for a ramen to be good, you need broth and you need noodles, right? And those are the essentials. And like, if you have an egg on top of your ramen, like, it's nice, but it's just an egg. You can't just have the egg. It's not the essential part. Basically saying that, like, he by himself can't carry the bowl of ramen. He needs his noodles and his broth to be there. And T1 is really interesting because I think Guma is probably the best, like, low resource, because Carrier does very often not play for him at all, right? Like, outside of specific, like, really aggressive lanes, Carrier loves to roam, make an impact on the map, and Guma, compared to like Pace, and even compared to Viper and aiming, like, those guys, as good as they are a lot more resource intensive. So I think Guma already had a decent summer, but he couldn't really make an impact. And then Owner had a really good summer, but a bad playoffs and pretty bad regional qualifier as well. So I think the opinion of him was kind of low. And he is definitely the most criticized. Like, I remember last year in summer leading up to Worlds, people were really dunking on this guy. I think it's just kind of the unfortunate reality of being Faker's jungler. It's just, you're going to have to deal with a lot of flack.
Do you think this is? I'm kind of curious on your take on this, because I think we maybe even talked about this, and I think I can't remember if I ever talked about it on air, but like, I've also always kind of thought that, like, maybe it's not PC to say, but like, Owner gets more criticism because he's the least popular player on the team. Sure. Yeah. Right? It's like you're on a team with Guma, Carrier, Zeus, and Faker, right? So it's like those are some of the most popular players of any team in the entire world. And guess what? Fans aren't going to blame their favorite player if they can help it, like whatsoever. So, owner has fans too. I'm not trying to say that, but like I've just always felt like he's by far the least popular on the team. And I don't know if that's true in Korea, but at least in Western worlds, that does seem to be the case for me.
Yeah, I'm not sure because it's hard to measure in terms of like jerseys and whatnot. But definitely in terms of fan sentiment, I do know. Even I've seen owner fans tweet about this as well. They're like, this guy gets a lot of flack. He's also a jungler. Like junglers always get the boot.
Of course. Who else do you blame?
You shouldn't have said that. Look at this podcast.
Every losing team has a jungler on it. All I'm gonna say.
As soon as you started talking, I was holding it in. Dude, the most obvious thing, blame the jungler. I will say though, to try and combat some of that, you should definitely go check out the T1 video that they made, Carved.
The
Carved
documentary
series. It is so good. The one they did on Guma was really good. The most recent one they put out is on Owner. And it is so good. You will become an Owner fan if you currently are not. The work that he puts in is really impressive.
I haven't seen it yet, but now I want to watch it. Something I have been wondering with T1 is, I swear they're in so much content, especially recently. I wonder if that has affected their performance in summer, because like how many hours of the day do they really have, right? Like they're just doing it all. So I wonder if they're finally getting a break. It's just like, please, like, can we not film a video tonight? Can we get some sleep so we can perform? Maybe they finally can play. I mean, I don't know. I'm totally speculating. I have absolutely no idea. But I've just noticed it. I'm like, wow, another T1 commercial. Like, is this AI? Like, how do they do it?
Well, it is like, and I don't even being from the LCK, like I don't feel qualified to actually, like, we don't have enough behind the scenes knowledge to really accurately judge how it's impacting the players, right? Like they don't really talk about it in interviews and whatnot as well. They do make hints towards it, but it is a very popular fan sentiment, yeah, because T1 is without a shadow of a doubt like the most popular esports team. But even just before Worlds, I think they have an event in Hong Kong. I know they were supposed to do a like you could chat with them, and then there was actually fan backlash because like we don't want to chat with these guys. We want them to have 2 days off, which I think was nice from the community, and because it's being pushed as far as it is, but it also is what allows these players to have the aura that they have, right? It's like it's just a double-edged sword. They don't get to be this larger than life without everything that they do. But I do like it's not just that, right? There was also the DDoS situation at the beginning of the year. Like the LCK had to go remote / like offline recorded broadcast for a while. And outside of that is also just the fact that even with them being 4th seed, just being on T1 alone is always going to generate an insane amount of pressure and hype that I think it's always something that with T1 specifically is talks about a lot. They're K-pop fans, as you were.
Yeah, I mean they're basically like K-pop stars, right? Like they are straight up. Yeah, I mean at this point. So I mean I can't imagine it doesn't affect them, like whether or not the trade-offs are worth it or whatever. Like just the reality of the situation is the fact that they do all this sponsor stuff is going to be a big reason that they command the massive salaries that they do. From the rumors that I've heard, which are completely unsubstantiated, it's many millions for that these players are making yearly now. And the way that T1 is going to recoup that, obviously, in a lot of ways, is through sponsor obligations, right? And so, that is kind of part of it. You definitely hope that the players are not being run into the ground or burned out. Like I have no insight into what their actual schedule is like, but I do have insight into what the schedules are like of players on other teams that are doing way less sponsor stuff, and it's already brutal, right? Like if you're a team that goes to every international event, qualifies for everything, your schedule is brutal. Just point blank period. It is like the league season goes like 11 months of the year. And it's pretty much nonstop. and T1 is participating in like the Red Bull League of their own or whatever. They're participating in EWC. Of course, they're going to MSI. They're going to Worlds. They're going deep in every playoffs run. They're doing all kinds of fan obligations and fan meets, and I'm seeing pictures of Faker in like perfume ads and like what I mean. Like they're just like in mainstream ads, right? Like I'm seeing like T1 fashion shoots on Instagram and like all kinds of stuff. So it's like, well, if the NA teams that I talk to have absolutely brutal schedules and the EU teams that I talk to have absolutely brutal schedules, well, T1 seems to do a lot more sponsor stuff, so would make sense that their schedule is even more brutal.
Chronicler, something maybe you would know this, I've been curious about is how would you say Faker's stardom compares to actual K-pop stars? Like, if Faker just walked down the street in Seoul, would he get mobbed? Or what?
From what I know, and I'm not that as tuned in into K-pop as some other people are, and like just general stardom. But as far as I know, there's like, when it comes to at least domestic fame, there are the big three, and one is BTS, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with. The other is Sonny, the football player, and then third is Faker. So like Faker, I don't think he can actually just walk. He would get mobbed 100%. Yeah, and like the rest of T1 is still insanely popular. Any T1 player will always have that, right? You still have people with their efforts playing in challengers now. It's pretty dire, but you still have people showing up with T1 effort jackets from way back. The rest of T1 is still on a high level, but Faker is, I think it'd be very hard to find a person in Korea that doesn't know who Faker is, even if they know nothing about esports, right? Like he is on the same level or above like most normal celebrities would be in Korea. Him specifically, like that's
so cool.
It is really cool. Yeah.
And I would even add on to that in China too, because I always see, on social media, you'll see like people posting pictures or videos and stuff. When Faker flies in to like airports in China, it feels like the entire airport is there to see Faker and like welcomes him there, and they have like areas like roped off and stuff. And so like, yeah, mega big.
I mean, he is like some of the top LPL players were the same way, right? I remember Uzi at kind of the peak of his fame. I can't even remember the social network that there was this vote on, but it was basically like a social network voted thing, like fan vote on like the most like famous person in China or like most popular celebrity in China. And this was, including like athletes, actors, like singers, politicians, whatever. Uzi was number one. And so it was like, it's these things where it's like some of these people, they transcend their sport, right? They just become like a famous athlete, right? It's like, you're in America or whatever. It's like you probably don't have to ever touch a basketball in your life to have heard of like Michael Jordan or LeBron or whatever, or Kobe, right? And I do think that kind of becomes the same sort of thing. So, I mean, it's definitely a lot of pressure on someone like that who is so in the public spotlight and has that incredible expectation that comes with it.
I think maybe because Faker's dealt with it for so long, and because of the person that he is, and the rest of the team right now, like it seems like they've gotten quite good at handling this massive amount of pressure. What do you think?
Yeah, I think at Worlds, yes, but even within the LCK domestically, we've had like recently still the players very clearly show sign of not being able to deal with it, right? Yeah. So.
Actually.
Yeah,
I'm totally forgetting the incident that happened earlier this year.
Yeah, we talked about it back then on the POC state as well. It is really hard to get a actual look behind the curtain for any of these players, right? And I think that what we see is only what we get to see, right? Like it's really hard to know. I'm sure that there are some people that just have the capability of just dealing with this, and obviously most players on T1 have looked that way because otherwise they wouldn't have had the performance that they've had so far. And yeah, how it plays into Worlds at this point, I think T1 also believe in their own mythos, and why wouldn't they, right? Like after the Worlds run they had last year, after 2022, And it is also, and we've been talking about T1 a lot, because they are so larger than life. For Gen.G, there wouldn't be a better way for Chovy specifically, and for this team, and Keen as well, that we haven't really talked about that much, I feel like, at all this Worlds. But like, Keen was there in 2018 when Afrika got free. Like, he was on that team. That man was in the slums, and like, just basic, like, his teams were bad. Like, he was on multiple like 10th, 9th, 8th place teams for years. And for many of these players, I think the opportunity to go through T1, like, it goes for any team, but for Gen.G as well, it is a really big opportunity, and also a matchup that technically should be favored for them, right?
I mean, the last thing I just add on really quick. I mean, it's like, if Chovy were to win Worlds and you do it in the like expected path of beating Faker and then beating Knight, then you just get the credit. You know what I mean? Like, there's no more like, but he hasn't done this, right? And there's no, it was a Mickey Mouse path or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, there's none of that. You beat the GOAT, and then you beat the current best LPL mid laner if you do that expected path.
And FlyQuest.
Shahu, exactly. And the real ghost, FlyQuest, baby. So, you know, and I mean, after edging out FlyQuest, it's all downhill from there. You know, it's like the level of competition is really going to fall off. So, I mean, it should be smooth sailing. Like, I think at the end of the day, Gen.G 3-0-3-0.
I was about to say, like, I can only imagine your guys' response if Gen.G end up completely sweeping T1.
And then 3-0 the finals as well.
You're
We're the
welcome.
second best team in the world, baby.
I don't think
Yeah.
either of those things are happening, but
Neither do I.
I'll believe it when I see it.
I'll believe it before I see it, because I don't think I'm gonna see it. So I get the enjoyment now. You know.
Okay.
Act quick. Act now.
I'm planning ahead. Exactly. Act now. Start dreaming about the Gen.G 6-0 to end the tournament. Enjoy that for a few days. You know, live in that world, and then back to reality. All right. Well, I think that's about it for this episode of Dive. Thank you, Meteos, for staying up late, and for our producers as well for staying up late for this one. And thank you, Chronicler, for joining us. This was definitely a lot of fun talking about it. And I hope all of you guys have been enjoying the Dive here at Worlds as well. And I hope you loved that series yesterday. If you somehow missed it and you're watching the episode of Dive, what are you doing? Go watch the series. It was incredible. The LCS is thriving, and that'll wrap it up for this episode here on The Dive, driven by Kia. Remember, if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode of The Dive. You can also check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere else. Make sure you send us your questions on Twitter with the hashtag TheDiveLOL. And Worlds is going to continue this Saturday, October 26th. It is going to be 5 a.m. Pacific or 8 a.m. Eastern. BLG is going to take on Weibo. Make sure to tune in. Thanks for watching. Thank you, Chronicler.
thank you for having me.